Yes, I'm very happy to present to you here the CHMP position paper on medication errors, which has been drafted in the context of benefit risk. This is the paper that has been published on the 24th of May at the EMA website for a public consultation phase of about 6 months. And I hope that you have all seen it. And in case some of you had not the opportunity to read it, I'm going to briefly now track you through and give a short summary of what the intention of this paper is and what it actually means to address. To give you the trigger behind why the CHMP came up with this sort of position paper, it actually arose during the discussions we had within a centralized hybrid application for a marketing authorization. And this product in question, which was a concentrate for solution for infusion, which then has to be diluted later on during clinical use, was composed as a higher strength as compared with the innovator product and also some other generics that are already available on the market. And upon recognizing this potential for a medication error simply by confusing the higher strength with the product that has already been in long and established use on the market, the CHMP identified major concerns regarding the safety of this new product to be authorized. And actually, in the end, we came to a positive opinion. However, by taking a number of intensive risk minimization measures, which were largely defined, first of all, in the product information, where we have been asking for a very clear labeling and very precise instructions on how to dilute this product of higher strength, and also in the RMP, where we have been asking for specific educational activities like a user testing for the healthcare professionals actually administering this product, and also dear healthcare professional communication to be sent out upon market launch of that product in the individual member states. And following from those very intensive benefit risk discussions that we had during this application, the CHMP was prompted to draft a position paper focusing on medication errors, specifically resulting from confusion situations. So this is what the paper is about. In the introduction, it already makes clear or lines out that it tries to address changes on the use of a product in clinical practice, which can certainly arise in different situations. One of those is that to a product that has been authorized previously, variations, line extensions, extensions of indications occur during the life cycle. Other than that, during the life cycle, also different formulations, presentations, routes of administrations, etc., as the example was, different strengths, may be brought to the market, and a similar or an equivalent situation would also arise when a new product, which is referring to an already authorized one, deviates from the authorized product. This was specifically the case for the situation that I have described to you before. And we stress the fact that in all such instances, for all such applications, we would want to see a comparison to the risk, to the existing product with specific regard of a potential risk of a medication error. And so the overall aim of this paper is to, first of all, raise awareness on the benefit risk evaluation of such products, which slightly differ from the one that we have already had before, and also to discuss measures on how to address such a potential risk. In general, of course, during the benefit risk balancing of a product, we in the CHMP recognize that any additional product may be a valuable expansion to the therapeutic measures we have in hand for treating our patients, and it may satisfy a well-motivated need. But on the other hand, any such additional product, as described, carries an inherent potential risk of inadequate use due to a confusion. One aspect that we try to take into account is that drug therapy generally is prescribed and also performed in many cases by well-trained, experienced personnel. It is based on an expert decision for treatment. It is applied, if it's not by the patient, him or herself, according to standard working procedure. And this is all of the prerequisites that we certainly need to take into account. However, at the same time, also realizing that any of those prerequisites may not be fulfilled and followed in every instance. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the problem. So then we give a few examples within these papers what we consider as a potential benefit of such an additional product. And of course, that is not a comprehensive list that would cover each and every single aspect, but some examples are that, for instance, sometimes preservatives or antioxidants may be avoided or reduced, which as a benefit could lead to reduced undesirable effects that would be provoked by the addition of preservatives. Also, a new product, possibly in a new strength or a new formulation, could show improved in-use stability, and again, there have reduced undesirable effects. Another potential benefit is that if preparation is facilitated, like you have a concentrate which you only need to dilute and you're not having to first dissolve a powder before going on with dilution, which also could actually reduce the potential for a preparation error. More appropriate concentrations with flexibility, different formulations for different indications or patient populations, specific populations like children or older people. But of course, this is not exhaustive, and we could go on bringing additional examples. So on the other side, what do we need to take into account when evaluating the risks of such an additional product? Certainly the risk and the consequences of such a medication error depend on, first of all, how much the product deviates from the one that has been already established in clinical use. It certainly also depends on the therapeutic window of the active substance, and we heard Jeffrey before, and Dr. Bryan elaborating on the narrow therapeutic index drugs. It certainly depends on the severity of the adverse events that may actually be caused by such a medication error, and then the steps we can take to avoid any possible confusion of such a product. And then, of course, there are some circumstances which actually might either increase or decrease the probability of such an error by confusion, like is the product administered by a healthcare professional or by the patient? Have healthcare professionals or patients undergone some kind of special training for administering the product? Is it intended in an emergency stressful situation where slips and lapses might occur more frequently, and confusion might arise more frequently? And also, one specific aspect, is the product intended for use in children, where in any case, sometimes products that have been formulated for adults are being used in children, and then there may arise some confusions or other misdosing, as we had several examples introduced in our keynote lecture. So the parameters that need to be taken into account for evaluating the risk side of the benefit-risk ratio certainly is then the occurrence and severity of the adverse events. It could be also loss of efficacy if a product is confused with another one. Again, the question of the narrow therapeutic index, which actually, in our opinion, needs to be judged on a case-by-case basis. whether the product is used in a particularly vulnerable patient population, as I have said before, the extent of any possible over or underdosing that actually could arise and is directly related to the extent of how the product in concentration or in strength might differ from the already established one, and also the proposals in the RMP that may need to be taken in order to make a clear distinction. Examples could be a specific size of the vial, specific warnings on packages, not only on the outer packaging, on the carton, but also on vials itself, and all kinds of any additional measures. So this is something that we need to take into account upon weighing of the benefits and the risks of such a product. Risk minimization strategies, of course, in this case, need to be discussed for each single product separately, and the most importance certainly lies on the possibility of taking preventive action. Some of those preventive measures actually correspond to the normal pharmacovigilance activities, like making use of the summary of product characteristics, the patient information leaflet, and the labeling, and very clearly pointing out there that there may be a difference and therefore the potential for confusion. So those are the most important routine measures. On top of that, we could actually also envisage that, as said, different vial sizes, different packagings, different names could make healthcare professionals and patients alike aware of the problem. A user testing, which I have put into hyphens, actually could be made use of in order not only to give the clear instructions for use, but also to question and to investigate from groups of healthcare professionals or patients whether those clear instructions of use are actually also understood, and therefore then would ascertain proper use of that product. And of course, specific training to pharmacists, to healthcare professionals could be offered either by, or in most of the cases, by the marketing authorization holder, sometimes also by learned societies. That could be another option. And in any case, that all would need to be included in a complete European risk management plan at the time of approval of such a drug. Then such risk minimization measures need also to be tested and monitored as regards their effectiveness. So that could either be routine monitoring of medication errors by means of signal detection, or making use of PSURs, which could either be checked with the regular periodicity over the 6-month interval, or in very serious cases, we could also envisage to have a shortening of the PSUR cycles. As said, in any instance, the most important question at the end of the day is also whether these risk minimization measures actually are effective, and therefore they need to be reevaluated within a certain specifically agreed time interval in order to make clear whether they are effective and can help prevent such an error. So to summarize, the recommendations that the paper gives from the CHMP is that we would certainly take into account a very critical assessment of the benefit risk, specifically for new drugs with or modified drugs with a narrow therapeutic index, or which are intended for a special patient population. In any such instances, an applicant should justify such an application by demonstrating that the additional risk of a potential medication error is somehow counterbalanced also by an additional benefit of such a product. The benefit-risk balance has to be done on an individual case-by-case basis, and in order uh, to prevent situations arising where such discussions take place at the very end of an approval process, we would strongly recommend and advise applicants having and making use of early meetings with regulatory agencies already during the stages of development of such a product, and not at the time when everything has been finalized and a final conclusion then might not recognize sufficient benefits in order to cope for and cover up for the risk. So actually, this paper, as I have said, was in the consultation phase for the 6-month period. And we have received a number of comments, actually quite extensive, from 12 different stakeholders. I believe it is some 67 pages that we have received, and we are in the process now of introducing and actually assessing, evaluating whether those comments and how these comments can be taken on board. I would certainly try and take the opportunity of this workshop here and receive further feedback and clarification from your side in order to get a clear picture on where the most evident deficit of that paper needs some improvement. On this final slide for discussion, I have just tried to summarize some of the major comments that we received. Several of them were very general, certainly pointing to the fact that we have not given a very clear definition of medication error. However, that largely is due to the fact that we are, as just said before, we are still lacking such a commonly accepted definition. Therefore, we have only made reference to the GVP Module 5. One other very general comment that has been made by several stakeholders was actually the wish, the request to widen the scope and not only referring to products which slightly deviate from an established product, but to open it up, this discussion and this evaluation of benefit-risk balance for all products in general, for OTC products in addition, for biologicals and vaccines in addition, including traceability issues. So this is something where I would certainly be very grateful for further feedback. Then we have been asked to include a more consistent terminology, which we certainly will be able to come up with. And we have had the criticism that any measures taken in RMPs may actually come too late when an error has already occurred. Some further specific comments on the text, and this certainly needs to be realized, that the level of expertise and errors made by healthcare professionals must not be underestimated. We have been asked to expand lists of examples for benefits and risks. We have been asked to clarify the place of user testing, which we certainly can do, meaning that user testing is not always intended for the patient who is going through the leaflet, but in this case is actually addressing more the healthcare professional and capturing whether the instructions of use are well understood and comprehended. And then another criticism was that PSURs were questioned as a monitoring tool, and maybe we come up during our further discussion for additional monitoring tools. With that, I'd like to thank you for attention.
While people are gathering their thoughts, perhaps I can make just a couple of comments. I think we need to distinguish between risk and harm. Risk is the chance that a harm can occur. Clearly, if you have a high risk of a trivial harm, that's different from having even a low risk of a serious or severe harm. And what the patients are concerned about really is the chances of benefit and harm that they may or may not experience. And in relation to that, if the harm is important, then we should also distinguish between severity and seriousness, which are often confused. It's possible to have a severe headache that is not serious. So these two terms are not synonymous, and we ought to pay attention to both of these aspects of potential harm. Are there any other questions, comments? Robin Ferner, can you tell us who you are when you give us your comment? This is Robin Ferner.
So, yes, I'm Robin Ferner. So the first thing I'd like to say is how grateful I am to Jeffrey, one, for mentioning me and arguments, or at least our debates over many years, and I hope that solves to a degree your problem about the definition of medication errors. The second point is a question for you and for David Cousins. David, you argue, amongst other things, that it's very important that errors are prevented by clear labeling in the summary of product characteristics. David Cousins says no one reads the summaries of product characteristics, and I just wondered whether one of you can enlighten us.
I'm okay with SPCs as far as they go. I mean, we don't have user testing of SPCs for health professionals. I find health professionals can't find what they need to find in SPCs. I also have difficulty with EU directive that you only need a patient information leaflet in products. And I have examples of injectable medicines which come with a patient information leaflet and no instruction to the health professional as to how they should prepare or administer the medicine safely. And I mean, so, you know, information is good when you can get it, but it's often not where it needs to be and easily accessible.
Well, the criticism is very well taken. We are all aware of the fact that doctors don't go through SPCs on a regular basis. However, one additional measure that we could foresee in such an instance is some specific communication material that is sent out by a marketing authorization holder upon product launch, making healthcare professionals aware of the fact that there is something is different and that they better go through the SMPC again before using the product. Now, one caveat that one has to realize is that this is not at the same time used as a sort of advertising measure, but this is something that we keep discussing.
Okay, thank you.